Ever wonder how your genes influence your health? Welcome to Beyond the Sequence, where we explore the fascinating world of DNA and its connection to your well-being. While each person's DNA is unique, many genetic patterns are surprisingly common. Join Amanda Archibald and Sarah Amadon as they delve into these patterns, revealing the deep insights they can provide into your health.
We're back, Sarah. And this time we're the other side of Portugal. I think last time we were chit-chatting. I don't even know if you said you were coming. I'm like, you can't say anything.
Well, no, I don't think I even knew at that time that, that there was a last minute opening, which literally that was my deal was like, hey, I can't commit, super early in the spring and it sold
That's
out. I
right.
knew it would. So yeah, from the last episode you guys heard to this episode, I went on Amanda's DNA wellness retreat in Portugal with her and Shannon. And I guess I'll just take a second to offer a little review because it was so phenomenal and transformative because all the things that we talk about in our practice, our clinical practice with all of our clients, Amanda and Shannon did such a beautiful job of like combining not just food, but some of the lifestyle factors. We did yoga once or twice a day, and there was a really amazing cold plunge meditation that, just being up front, a couple of the other ladies did it as well, but I was the last one to go, and I was like, okay, I'm all this anticipation. And when I got in there, it was like an emotional release. And I just started like sobbing uncontrollably in this cold plunge for the, 3 minutes that we were in there, completely unexpected. So just being open to all of the things in your life that could be impacting your genes and impacting your stress management and resilience. And so, yeah, incredible. So anyone who's considering going on a DNA wellness retreat next year to Greece or the clinician one you have going on in Rhodes as well, do it. Don't hesitate.
Oh, that's so sweet, Sarah. Oh, yeah, it was amazing time. It was called Recode, and my partner in these immersive retreats, Charles Lementier, is based in Lisbon, Portugal, so American, so trained in the US, but European citizen, as well as an American one these days. But we birthed the idea of these DNA informed retreats. So yeah, Sarah was able to join 14, 15 other amazing women from around the globe in a really special time for 6 days. Yeah, immersing ourselves in across all the planes, planes, planes or movements, or the things that our genes are exposed to, like community, connections, food, the science, of course. And then, of course, we went into Lisbon and we spent time at the ocean. So it was really great. It was like we put your DNA on a stand and then moved the environment around it, right? So yeah, but it was good to see you the other side of
I
the Atlantic.
know. It's been so good. I really enjoyed digging into the DNA life report as well, a little bit deeper. And yeah, there are a number of great reports that we can utilize. And you've done such a good job to train me and other people around the world to not just read reports, we read genes and we do them forwards and backwards. And that's how you've trained us. And so way to go, because
Yeah.
reports and companies, sometimes they come and go. So we can't just be single-minded in that way.
No, you can't be sort of monogenic with the testing company you use. And it's interesting. That's a springboard for what we're going to talk about over in this podcast. I was going to say over the next hour. You never know. We'll try and keep it to an hour. We want to talk about how do you know who's qualified to read your DNA? How do you know if somebody is loading your report to ChatGPT or AI, or they actually know what they're doing? And the reason we want to tackle this, who's qualified to read your DNA, is of course because we're in DNA pretty much all day, every day. It's our clinical life revolves around it. So we're pretty good at reading it, even though we say so ourselves. And as Sarah so graciously said, I mentored you. I guess I sort of trained you. You learned, but I guess I did train you.
You
And then
did.
mentored you.
Absolutely. You should take all the credit
Yeah,
in the
okay. So
world.
I trained Sarah, but part of my, about 30% of my time, I am teaching, training, coaching, and mentoring clinicians around the world. And as you will say, Sarah, they range from physicians and pharmacists, of course, many dietitians, nutrition therapists, a lot of naturopaths, and some health coaches who are really vested in supporting practitioners who are reading DNA. So what is concerning to us is that we're in this all day, every day, in many different ways, mostly translating it, but you are also mentoring now too, Sarah. But we're also on social media. And what is drawing our attention is there are a lot of very, very well-intentioned groups that people will gravitate to, where they're discussing genetics, epigenetics, or a specific gene. Like MTHFR is the star to attract people to a group because everyone has this gene. And you've heard us talk about this before. Well, we all have the gene. We all have many, many genes. But the point is we don't have time to sit and jump in on these groups. But every once in a while they'll flash up, or we'll end up in a rabbit hole in one of them. And what is happening is a flurry or a sequencing of questions that keep coming up that are very alarming for us, in terms of the information that's being spread, what is a myth. Everything, I believe, or 90% of what's occurring in these groups is very well intentioned, is people trying to help people. That's why people join. But there's a lot of misinformation. And there's a lot of crying out for help. Like, how do I know? Who do I go to? So that's what we want to unpack and give you examples of what can come across as misinformation, and try and tease through that and just help you out. But really, Sarah, I mean, that's where we want to focus. Anything you want to add before we start with, how do you know who's trained and what questions do you want to ask?
Yeah, the side of things for me is that I started as a patient first. So I was in those Facebook groups before I was a dietitian, before I was interpreting other people's DNA, where I was just trying to learn to understand. So we call MTHFR the gateway gene, the thing that most people have heard of, and then they think it's a diagnosis, but it's not. So we spend tiny amounts of time in our DNA consultations, even addressing MTHFR, because we've got bigger fish to fry upstream at the cellular level. But because everybody's heard of it, we kind of have this little bit of a panic. And so I was in a couple of MTHFR Facebook groups, forums, to kind of learn a little bit more about it while I was simultaneously trying to look at PubMed and read papers on it, try to understand my own genetics. And then my co-host for a Facebook group that I started, we were in a group together where they said, no, you can't talk about tongue ties in this group. And I was like, why not? So my co host of this Facebook group and I were like, let's start our own group. So we started a group called MTHFR Connections. You can find it, and it's vetted, it's moderated. So I'm behind some of that. I don't look at it much. I would spend a lot of time just reading forums and not working. But it is moderated. And so I like that. At one time, it was a closed group, but that I didn't have the posts moderated, and people would just post any old thing. It could have been, the political related thing with health and healthcare. And it was just like, no, I want people to post questions. So I've kind of controlled that side of it in our Facebook group, where if it's just something you saw or something you read that you wanted to share, I'll consider it. But a lot of those I decline. And so no offense to you, no offense to, anybody that's in the group, but I want people to ask questions of other people who have been in the group for a long time. And I rarely get comments that are reported. I rarely have drama. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to have a conversation on like what to look out for when you're on social media or you're on Reddit and, you know, on the internet in general, because AI is not going anywhere. So we need to think through the ways in which we're operating safely and ethically to be able to keep moving forward, but to use AI to our advantage, but not in a way that is replacing, you know, things that are appropriate and safe and within the context of the individual. So I think this is a conversation worth having.
Absolutely. Let's make sure we come back to the AI piece, how to use it, when to use it, when to spot that somebody is using it, whether to educate themselves or whether to push a product on you, which is a huge issue right now. So we're going to make sure we come back to that. But let's answer the question, how do I know if somebody's qualified to read my DNA report? How do I find that person? How do you know if somebody's qualified, Sarah?
That's a great question because we have, you and I are registered dietitians, and I considered going the route of, you know, well, I could just do some training in genomics and be a nutritionist. Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. Someone who's a dietitian has a 4-year, now a master's degree requirement as of 2024. So, you know, there are trained, credentialed, and licensed practitioners out there. That's not to say there are not valuable individuals who are trained in genomics, because there definitely are. And there's also dietitians and other healthcare practitioners who don't know anything about genomics, or they may not understand the nuances. So it's really honestly a tough question to answer. But I think if they have a website or they have a social media account, are they being genuine in what they know and what they don't know, or realizing, hey, it just depends on your genetics? Because if they're offering a solution for basically anyone who has MTHFR, that's a red flag for me, because, you know, AI or any individual does not know the context of the person's case or their symptoms. Like, what problem are we trying to solve? So if you have MTHFR, you have COMT. Is it fast? Is it slow? Are we interpreting the science correctly to be able to offer recommendations? But ultimately, you know, just because you have a gene doesn't mean you need to do anything.
No, yeah, that's true. So the reason I'm asking that question is I just saw a flurry of late of people saying, being very frustrated at their doctors because they didn't know what this individual was asking for, what they were talking about. So let's be fair to the majority of licensed healthcare professionals who are not trained in a specialty. You are not trained to be OBGYNs, right? Or specific specialties. I mean, I could no sooner be a chiropractor than fly in the air, you know. And neither one of us are physicians. They are trained to do things that we're not trained to do. The majority of physicians will tell you they have no knowledge of genomics or genetics, and they certainly are not experts in the biochemistry that's required in this field. So for you to show up and say, here's my genetics, and them not to know is valid on their side, because the training for this field, as I say, because I train individuals, you're 18 months just to learn. Now I would say 12 months if you're a fast learner like you, Sarah. And then you need another probably 18 months, so another 6 to 12 months. So you're into 18 to 24 months, realistically, before you can open your doors as a clinician, work by yourself and say, I can read your genetics. Now, the last thing I knew, physicians generally are so busy seeing patients around the world, they can't take a sabbatical to do that level of training. They just can't. And you want to find physicians who've had the time to do that. Otherwise, they may be using ChatGPT, and I can almost guarantee they're not, you know, because of the liability and because of the transparency and because of ethics. So the reality is they don't have time. So who do you pivot to? So you may go to a functional medicine practitioner, potentially a functional medicine doctor. The same questions that or suggestions that we're going to make to you on how do you know if someone's qualified apply to licensed practitioners too, right? So the
Yeah.
first thing is, are they credentialed and licensed in their field? Means they're degreed and they have a license to practice in their field. That is like number one. Because otherwise, what is happening is you're going to see, especially in social media, or it can be an Instagram ad, wherever, whatever, somebody on TikTok will say, quote, I've read thousands of DNA reports. That's a classic. That's a red flag. Sarah, I don't know about you. I've been in the field longer than you. Can you say that you've read thousands already?
No, definitely not.
The field hasn't been around long enough for you to read thousands. And maybe if if you're loading and you're a programmer and you can load things that I'm telling you, you can't yet, unless it's, you're working at a university at a research level, they're able to load and analyze thousands of DNA reports, not through the lens that we're reading them. So a licensed practitioner is number one. Flag. If they tell you they've read thousands of report, call it. I'm telling you, because a report, and we can read them pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say thousand. I maybe I'm up there because I'm in different areas of the industry in terms of how I'm looking at the reports. No, because the field hasn't scaled up fast enough. I would argue for an experienced practitioner to be able to turn around and say they've done that. What do you think, Sarah? So
Yeah,
license and
yeah.
share number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the number as well. I would say, when I opened my doors 3 years ago and started doing DNA interpretations, I had already been doing them with friends and family for free because I didn't feel comfortable like charging someone
Right.
for something I was still learning. So it was like, okay, here's what I see so far. What's really cool is we continue to learn and we learn about like, oh, a new mechanism we didn't know that this enzyme did. And so sometimes I'll learn something after reading a paper and then I'll think of a client that I've had. I'm like, oh, I got to go back because I remember we were stuck on something.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to that and I'll even reach out to them and go, hey, I learned something new. How are you doing? Because we might have this other intervention that we could add in.
Exactly.
So this is always growing and changing, and I will never claim to know everything. We're constantly learning. But I would say after I probably had, I don't know, 15 or 20 clients, was when I really was starting to see those patterns that we pick up on. And then eventually you start getting a little bit more comfortable with that. But up until that point, it's like you can read, get trained and mentored. And then I would try it out on some friends and family and just develop some case studies on your own or with the, mentorship of another trained clinician to kind of go, okay, Amanda, here's what I would say. Here's the interventions I would suggest. What do you think of that? And then that mentor can go, okay, well, here's another one. Here's this, but what do you think of this? And kind of give that feedback because
So you're talking about it from a clinician perspective, but if you're a member of the public, 'cause that's why I started to set the bar.
yeah.
The licensure piece is important because it's scope of practice, but it also is a validation of the education. And for somebody to read these reports, you have to have a very deep understanding in the biological sciences to start with. Then you need efficiency in biochemistry. And that is usually what sorts the sheep out from the goats because it's the most detested field of study for most healthcare professionals. And because they haven't been taught it right, it is hard. It's like learning quantum physics, but it's biological. You either get it or you don't. And you cannot read genomics if you don't understand what the biochemistry is because that's what genes do. They create the proteins that are integral to how your physiology functions. So biochemistry is how the body functions. It's the language of the body, if you will, and DNA is the recipe that spits out that language. So if you can't have a degree of fluency in that, and that's where the 18 to 24 months comes from. And that's sitting on top of having a degree that focuses in the biological sciences, usually.
Yeah,
So,
there's so many prerequisites involved
yes,
just to even do some of these things. So, at a basics, level, have they taken biochemistry at all? Just as a basic, you know, entry level option. Because that, if we don't have any biochemistry background, we're in trouble. You
yeah,
can't
you
interpret
can't.
something if you don't understand the pathways and it's a schematic. Like when you can look at the MTHFR and folate cycle, and we do spend a lot of time in those, but then you pan out and there are dozens of these cogs that touch each other. And then
Exactly.
here's all the enzymes that are within those cogs. Here's all the cofactor nutrients that plug into, those cogs and those enzymes. And so if you don't have someone who knows how to read some of those, even if it's a new pathway to you, you can still spend time trying to learn it. And I learned new ones today, like, oh, I haven't seen any of my clients in the, I don't know, 300 reports I've read in the last 3 years. I haven't seen anyone with this homozygous SNP, so I haven't spent a lot of time reading up on it. Let me do
Exactly.
that,
And
you
so
know?
when you're saying reading up, I mean, when we see something new, now we have to go and read up, what is the science saying, which requires a level of understanding. This isn't reading abstracts and conclusions. It's reading what these genes do, what they impact, and kind of like dominoes. It's never one road. A gene is never one road. A SNP or variant is never one road. It splinters, if you will, in terms of its impact in the body, is a way to think about it. So a lot of the advice that you're seeing being given, and then I want to wrap up this professional piece, is like, if you shoot this one thing at that one gene, it'll fix it. Anything you fire at genes can have a pharmacological effect if it's at the dosing that majority of our supplement companies are formulating at. So we're going to come back to that. But going back to just be aware. But coming back to who's qualified, so we've given you like the basics. You don't just go and take a 6-week course or a 3-month course. You can. But where is the training? Where's the mentoring? That is why physicians do internships and residencies and postdoc, because they have to be trained how to use what they just learned. Leading up to that point is a bunch of learning, right? Written and spitting out in an exam and passing exams for all of us, right? But the art of this field is how you interpret the science, and the science is not easy. So majority of people can never have read thousands of reports and be able to advise you. That's called kind of crowdsourcing biochemistry and genomics, putting it through some kind of an engine, or maybe even stealing people's ideas, I don't know, and putting out there and saying, I'm an expert, they're not. So you need to ask somebody you want to see, what is your training? How long have you been in the field? Have you any idea of how many reports you've read? Do you have any testimonies? It's really, really important. And in this field, I would almost say, if you're not sure, you ask that individual, may I speak to one of your clients? Is somebody willing to talk to me about your work? It is that important. So,
Yeah, the testimonials piece, I mean, yes, it can help you make sales, with your
careful.
practice, but it also gives insight into how someone helped you, because everybody's a little bit different. So if someone's selling, the solution is this pill or this supplement, or they go to supplements automatically based on your genetics, that's a huge problem as well, because we use a food first approach. If we have the absence of the food matrix and the synergistic effect of food, it's a very expensive solution that, if that's done by supplements only. So yeah, it's
So
a
it's a bit,
lot.
so There's, I don't want to say this field is in its infancy, it's not, but buyer beware. That's what you want to say, like big flashing red sign, particularly if you're in a Facebook group, and there's a lot of people crying out, where can I go for help? You and I have talked about being able to actually build out a network of providers that we know have gone through the training and can help you in your zip code. Hopefully give us a chance. We're a ways off being able to do that, but we feel the need is pretty intense out there as well to help people, because you as listeners are frustrated. You can't get to well, and so you, like we're saying, you're crowdsourcing information, and the kind of information we're seeing is frankly alarming, and it's not being given from people who are trying to be charlatans, who 99% of the time it's people trying to help you. But what's happening is usually there's a cry for help, and we'll give some examples. There's a cry for help, and then 80 people will jump in with their personal view on what helped them, which means they're trying to help you. But in our field, what helps you cannot necessarily, can be actually very damaging to the next person, because we're N of one. We are unique. That's what we see in genomics. So just because a B complex helped you, or the methylfolate form helped you, it can actually put somebody in bed for days based on their genetics, meaning in terms of how it impacts their mood or sleep, exactly, etc. So again, a lot of the information is being given compassionately, but it's not helpful. And most of it is in the supplement form.
Yeah, and what happens, Amanda, if we use these high doses of some of these supplements? And I'll give an example just this week.
Yeah, I get that.
Some of the concussion protocol, should really include omega-3s. There's research to suggest B6 is really helpful as a concussion protocol. But what happens if someone has been taking B6 and they have a B6 toxicity? That can be pretty bad. And someone responded to something about them having B6 toxicity and like Parkinson's like symptoms with tremors and
Yeah, because
neurological
it would have
damage.
that neurological impact, right? Yeah, that could be very, very frightening for someone. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting you mentioned B6, because it's one of the hardest vitamins to actually measure efficiently in the body. And so a lot of times what we see when we're running sensitive labs, and we have to be creative about how we're looking at that particular molecule, we see it as very high on a number of labs, which actually is indicating to us inefficient utilization, means it's not being utilized. So we have an issue. It's like, well, do you give more because you know it's not being utilized, or do you fix the underlying issue? Or is it really detrimental? It's like, yeah, wait, it's inefficient, so give more. And actually, then those of us who are not physicians would be practicing medicine. And those of you who pretend to know what you're doing and you do something like that are actually practicing without a license, which is very
Yeah.
damaging. It's actually illegal. So, yeah, that's an interesting one. I haven't seen that with the, it would make sense, so in the space you're in, that you would see those kind of protocols.
Yeah, I think B6 is one of the vitamins that we want to be careful with because we have found that it can be toxic. But in my mind, I think it has more of an impact to show up as toxicity because there's a block somewhere else. Because if the B vitamins are all water soluble,
Good point.
theoretically, it should pass in urine in excess. But I think that there's actually a hiccup somewhere else that needs to be unclogged to prevent or reduce the risk for what shows up as a B6 toxicity. Not saying it isn't, just
No,
that
that's a really good point.
I think there's more to the picture. But then we have
Yeah.
proponents of like orthomolecular medicine who basically have high dose vitamin C as part of their protocol, almost every protocol.
Wow.
And what have we found, Amanda, with high dose vitamin C, what really happens or what
It
can
becomes
happen?
a pro-oxidant instead of acting as an antioxidant, so a stabilizer of these free radical unstable oxygen molecules, which are a part of living, right? The body knows how to handle those. But we've known from the literature since the 90s that when you amp an antioxidant, it actually can become a pro-oxidant. That was some of the research out of Finland that was like alarmed the whole medical community, the scientific community. Wait a minute here, because I think, was it a smoking study and they the AMP A or E, can't remember which, but they actually had to stop the study because it became a pro-oxidant. That is not what you want to happen. No wonder high doses of vitamin C actually result in diarrhea. It's like you think the body's telling you something like this is toxic. So you actually ignite a reaction that you don't want to ignite.
Yeah, it can
The
turn some
body,
of those cogs too fast, or it
just a
can
little.
clog some of them up, or in the case of, some of our clients end up in kidney stones.
Oh man,
So
yeah, there's that
we
too.
have to
The, bo-
be, I
the body
just, I,
has innate intelligence. If you need to add supplementation in, it's usually at a tiny amount until the body kind of like the teeth, there's enough air in a tire, right? Or the wheel's not out around anymore, and the body can take this like huge deep breath and it's like, okay, we're good, we got it. We can rely on food now with a little bit of help, but that's usually what is needed. But I think it was an interesting, as I was looking this weekend, like preparing for this podcast, but also thinking about some of the other work I'm doing. I was actually using AI to help me think through something. And what AI actually said, and I think it's true, to the conversation we're just having about supplementation, and we're going to come right back to that here with my next thing I want to ask or dive into. What AI actually came back is the weakest link in the genomic field is most of the advice is being given by supplement companies. Now, they're not out there saying, here, you've got this genomic, say this. Well, one started that way. But for you and I working where we work in this space, it is inconceivable how highly formulated so many of these supplements are based on how genes work. It just doesn't make sense. And that's what we're seeing with people who are trying to get help with their MTHFR. I've got this gene. The classic is I'm homozygous MTHFR 677 and I'm comped fast or I'm comped slow. Well, the first question is MTHFR homozygous deadly? Those are some of the questions we get. Am I doomed because I've got this gene? And I don't know what comped is, and how do I know if I'm fast or slow? Right. And then you say, well, take this supplement. It doesn't matter. The difference between comp being fast and slow is a mental health basically somebody having what they would call a mental health day. Like, how did I get to be so anxious, so overwrought, or weeping, or like I can't sleep for days, versus somebody's like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing I ever did. I can actually think straight, because when you're a fast compter, sometimes we need to add in more B vitamin support, but it's not just that. So how would you know that if you're not running biochemistry in your head? You don't know.
you don't know. And yeah, there are some things there are all kinds of resources online that are free that help describe what that gene is, what it does, if it's this genotype or this genotype, like what that could possibly mean.
Yes.
But think on it. What are you trying to treat? Is there a mental health component? Is there a chronic pain component? Is there poor sleep? Or, what is it that we're trying to deal with? And maybe what are the symptoms of a fast comped or a slow comped? Or what could possibly show up, or how do you test, methylation with homocysteine? We talk about, that lab value all the time. But I have family members who are homozygous for MTHFR 677, and I can sleep at night. I'm okay. Like, there there are people in my life every day, and I'm not panicked. I'm not panicked.
No.
I'm okay. This is useful information. This is not information that means you need to do something and intervene now. Like
exactly.
this, it's not like you have an open wound and you need surgical,
No, you're
intervention.
okay. Yes, it's not life
Yeah,
threatening. And if, as
there's
a matter
so
of
much
fact,
panic.
if both MTHFR, because they're different points on the gene, where 677 is closer to the promoter region, so the the dysfunction of the enzyme it puts out is more dysfunction. It's a higher level of dysfunction, potentially the 1298. Just know that if you are homozygous for both of those numbers, you would not be talking to us. It's not considered compatible with life, from what I understand, and I've never seen it.
I've
So
seen it once, actually. I've
homozygous,
seen
homozygous. Did you
for
rerun
both.
the report and that person was still alive?
Well, what's really interesting is that those who tend to have homozygous for both have been of Ukrainian descent,
Oh, interesting.
and that their family members were in Ukraine during the Chernobyl disaster.
Interesting. So yeah, so the
Yeah.
mutation that may have been driven, so like an epigenetic sort of, yeah, I didn't know
Hmm.
you can do that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's been really fascinating. I've seen it once, maybe twice, and
yeah,
I think maybe twice, and both of those people were of Ukrainian
yeah.
descent.
I have,
So it was.
that's so interesting. And there during that time, so that would make sense. And they survived, right? Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, or they were either very young or offspring of those who were there
Yeah,
when it
that's
happened. Maybe
fascinating.
not super, they were not like close by and like in the town
No,
nearby. It was
but
just they were, you know,
the
they
drift.
left and moved eventually to the United States, and
Yeah.
so it's just interesting to consider the ways in which, there's possible spontaneous mutations
Yeah,
involved, which,
exactly.
we say your
Versus.
genes don't change, and I say they don't change except in very, very rare circumstances like a nuclear disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Or like abject trauma, Holocaust,
Hmm.
that kind of, or what, some of the political situations we're seeing, even in modern day times. So, yeah,
But
you're
our
good.
biochemistry, we adapt.
We do.
The body has all of those back doors that, you talk about sometimes. We have a trap door to keep the body functioning, even if it's not optimally.
We do.
So,
Especially the methylation cycle, it's that important. And on that note, to the point about just trying to get insight before you take somebody's advice who doesn't know because they're not you. I'm totally paraphrasing here just from an individual who posted in one of the social media forums. She said, I've got one copy of the MTHFR gene, whatever that means. We don't know which one it is or what it is. All my doctors have said you need a methylated B vitamin. Whoever, now it sounds like a kind of a very broad statement, right? All my doctors, you've asked every single one of them. But the bottom line, this individual said, I've already been suffering from anxiety, depression, and grief and trauma. And I'm not going to name the company, but it's a very well-known company, a very good company. And she started taking one of their methylated B complexes. And it had exactly the effect I've said. She said, I've never felt worse. So depressed, so here's somebody has a history as she's reporting of trauma, trying to find help. Said, okay, well, I'll take this as a last straw, and bam. Now she's digging herself out even more. Potentially she's going to go to the physician and say, I feel so terrible. Who knows how she's going to be treated, right? But she ends up, I'm desperate to feel better. So these forums serve up a place for people who are really trying to find help. And they're not getting the best advice. And it was a different post here, and it wasn't associated with the lady who had just posted. The individual just posted. Somebody jumped in, and it's an example of you couldn't be more upside down in the science. This individual saying folic acid causes MTHFR to express. It doesn't. You just folic acid. They're associated in a cycle, but just because you're exposed to folic acid, it doesn't express anything. It's It's something that is used to prop up a cycle for some individuals who may need some help with folate. But yeah, we tend actually never even to recommend anything that contains folic acid. And if it is used, oftentimes it may be used from a medical perspective, pouring into a cycle when we're looking, when somebody's being treated for cancer, for example, and that's way out of my scope. But the point is, like, it's like the two don't even belong in the same sentence. And that's the kind of information that's coming up. Yeah, I won't go
Yeah,
any more into that. I have another example.
if you go back to our folate episode, I think anyone listening to this should go back to the folate episode that we did, a couple months back, because we talk about, how does folic acid maybe contribute to symptoms if it's sort of gumming up the folate cycle. MTHFR doesn't mean you need to take a methylated anything or any
Yep.
kind of vitamin. If you're eating, a wide variety of foods and folate rich foods, we want to encourage folate. So if you have MTHFR, if you have methylation SNPs, we encourage eating folate from food. I think that,
Because folate from food is in the form of folate that MTHFR produces, if you will. If you're, yeah, that's the point of MTHFR. It takes one form of folate and converts it to a form the body can use. But oh, by the way, that form is robustly found in whole foods. But there is a rate limiting step, and I was thinking about it today. So we have to qualify that. So it is, and there's other forms, there's 2 or 3 other forms of folate in food that the body can take in, transform, and get to that. The end form of the folate cycle was the 5-MTHF form. There's other offshoots of the folate cycle that are beyond what we want to talk about today, because otherwise we'll be talking about folinic acid and not finish where we're going here. But one of the things about folate or any food is the gut has to work. And people who have a list of concerns, neurological, feel terrible, aches, pains, migraines, what have you, it doesn't necessarily say there's something wrong with the gut at all. You can't put the 2 and 2 together, but oftentimes there is. So why am I mentioning this? Because even food, the folate that's in food has to get absorbed. And there's genes involved with that. So I always find this fascinating. It's called a polyglutamate. And what the body has to get into the cell, this is where your gut is really important, because on the brush border of your gut, sort of the cells like the face, the lumen, like the part of where the food passes by, if you will, an enzyme is produced there that takes that form of folate. Think of it like it's got a backbone, it's got little tails on it. So it takes those, it removes the tails, so the glutamate strands, and allows them to be imported into the cell along with that backbone, and then they're all stuck back together again. And so I don't even know what an analogy of this is, but you have like a backbone, like a comb. That's what I was thinking, like an old comb, and it has all those teeth. So you have to kind of pull the teeth out, if you will, and then they're transported into the cell. Then they're stuck back on that backbone. You're like, why would the body do that? To prevent it losing those little teeth again. So it kind of, it's taken apart and then stuck back together again. The body's brilliant. But there's a gene that can get in the way of that transaction taking place, if you will, FOLR1. So it helps facilitate that process. And if that's dysfunctional, yeah, maybe there's some challenges with getting food from folate into the body, but the body is pretty crafty. So the bottom line is, if your gut isn't working well, the ability for you to be able to absorb folate from food may be compromised. So you can eat all the foods you want, and you may not be able to get to a level of folate from food until we optimize the gut. So that might be a place where we might use a supplement, maybe, until you can kind of bring up the gut and get your body to recognize and absorb that information so you can use it. So, and actually, Sarah, that's where, what you're doing is you're taking that polyglutamate apart, and those little strands of monoglutamates, they can get in. Well, folic acid is a monoglutamate. So it can kind of bypass that absorption issue, but then it has creates other log jams. So listen to the podcast we talked about folic acid, folate. So
Yeah, and that's an interesting point with some of the crossover. I think individuals who maybe struggle the most with fortified foods and folic acid might have high glutamate levels. And so maybe there's this excess of glutamate because it's a mono, glutamate
that's true.
molecule instead of a polyglutamate molecule. And trying to understand the mechanisms by which we are contributing to neuro diagnoses like ADHD or autism. And I know that's running rampant in the news right now with folinic acid as a potential treatment for individuals on the spectrum. But most of those individuals have chronic gut issues too.
They
So
do. It's one's begotten the other, right? Because
yeah,
they have gut issues because one of the things that people feel they can control when everything else is out of control is food, right? And then if we're eating food that's injurious to the gut, then it's associated with pain. You've been there and done that, right? And like the pile of food or the ingredients in the grocery basket gets smaller and smaller. And then you have food fear. It's very debilitating and very real, right?
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. The diversity is pretty important for all of our clients and for every human being. As much diversity in foods as we can have is great.
And by the way, folinic acid is only as good as the next gene down. Folinic acid does not guarantee you get to the active form of folate. It just is stacking the cycle just a little lower down so you can work your way around some other sluggish genes, but you still got to get through MTHFR, people. So
Have we unclogged the drain? And I know we
no,
talked.
we just stuck even
If,
more stuff in it and
yep.
given you and me a job. I mean, it's like
Yes.
it's right there. And that's not the point of this, but what you heard us just say is like we're immediately able to look at your genes and say that isn't going to work for you. That's just a very
Or not
expensive
yet.
supplement.
We have a number of things we need to do first before
Yes,
we add in methylated B vitamins.
got to unplug the
So
drain.
got to unclog the drain, and Haley Hurd has said this. Adding methyls to an inflamed body is like putting fuel on a fire,
Oh, it
and
is.
watching it go
It
up.
is. Like the tennis, somebody turned up the tennis ball machine and there's no one to return the serve, right? It's like, wow. The body's like, no, I don't think so. Yep.
Yeah.
What
What are
else are
some
you
other
seeing?
yeah, I was going to say, what are some other questions we see in some of these groups?
What have you seen? Because you've seen some real humdingers. And again, when we say humdingers, it is said from a compassionate perspective, like, yeah, I can see with what you told us why you're struggling. But when you only give us two pieces of information, we may be looking at a base of 80 to 130 genes. Two genes is like walking in the dark with no flashlight. So, what are you
Yeah.
seeing?
Some of the open Facebook groups where anyone can post anything, you could create, an AI generated handout and then share it. And then, it gets shared hundreds of times. And this is kind of the wrecking ball that I'm watching happen in some of the open Facebook groups and forums is anyone can create any, AI generated handout or tool without editing or review of a clinician that goes, actually, that's not entirely how that works, to people who don't know any better. And then they share that thing and that gets shared. And then everyone sort of interprets that as fact when where's the citations? Where's the references? Because if you're creating some of these tools and handouts and they're just getting shared and shared, and oh, by the way, I'm the one who can solve this problem for you if obviously we're clinicians and we can self-promote all we want, but what we're saying is ask good questions. What are the citations? What are your credentials? Because even colleagues who, run some of these labs, Instead of hiring a practitioner to go over their results with them, they run it through ChatGPT. And, they have said that they've swapped some of the, letter genotypes, and then that changes what the result and the recommendations will be. They've taken or run raw data through ChatGPT and other AI platforms, and it has gotten the interpretation wrong because it has not done it correctly. So then, if you're reading into like this is fact using artificial intelligence, you're running a risk that this could be actually a really dangerous recommendation if you don't know the whole context of the individual. So I'm not saying this so that you'll come see me. I'm saying this as like a concerned patient, as well, where like we need to be thoughtful and conscientious about how we're using this information. And obviously our data is breached every other day. And so I'm sure most of the world doesn't even care that their DNA is out there anymore. But once it's uploaded into some of these platforms, it's no longer private either. So if that is of value to you, don't use, some of these platforms. But I think the pushback that I'm seeing in some of the Facebook groups is, well, I can't afford or I cannot find a practitioner who would interpret the DNA
That's true.
results as the reason for using AI. So I think it might be good to talk about what's the value that a practitioner would provide that is not seen at face value above and beyond credentials. So we talked about the credential side and the training side, but what kind of value would you or I or any of our other amazing colleagues actually provide that is not just about DNA interpretation?
Yeah, I mean, DNA is linear, right? DNA, for the way I like to explain it, is just a signpost. So when you are interacting with AI or something that's posted on Facebook, it's very two-dimensional. It's like a mathematical equation. A plus B equals C. Then if you add D, then you go off into another equation. And now I'm starting to think, I love my metaphors. And as you know, my first degree was in the UK, so I was educated very, very differently. But our mathematics curriculum was pretty brutal before we even got into university. And I started to think of like linear algebraic equations. And then you got into calculus and quadratic equations. We had to do all that before we were 16. So where am I going with this? AI or social media is going to give you a two-dimensional experience. You're going to put in an answer and it's going to spit something out. It's still two-dimensional. What a practitioner is going to be able to do is add the third dimension and the depth. Because what we're able to understand is not only how the genetics work, but how they equate to your unique story. And that's the difference, because so much of what we do is think about what is going on with you. The genetics just give us like a thinking board to then take everything and pivot it, to this is what we're going to do next. Okay, so we are literally computing at multiple levels, kind of working out all the angles, thinking about the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, to get to this is what we need to do. So we're able to listen, compute, create a strategy that's over maybe multiple weeks or months and sets reality for you, is where the human piece comes into. There's no software that can do it because I'm writing software. And I tell you, I can create it's all based in pattern recognition, based on being in the field for a long time. But I can never take the human out of what I'm doing. There's no way. There's no way. And I actually want to make a little plug here, then like flip that one over to you to see if you've got a different answer, because I have all kinds of little metaphors. And some of them may hit with some people and some may not. But there is actually a very nice online service tool software, I guess, run by Debbie Moon, our colleague Debbie Moon, called Genetic Life Hacks. And Debbie's very research based, and that's where she's coming from. And yes, you can load your 23andMe there, but you can look up genes there to inform yourself. She's not that I remember running a polygenic kind of algorithm. You can look at a number of genes together, but it's not built that way. But if you want to really go deep to understand what genes are doing and what they may need, that's a good place to go. And she's like an MS in biological sciences. She's close to my heart because she did her undergraduate at the Colorado School of Mines, which is one of the foremost geophysical petroleum engineering schools in the world, where very few women went.
Wow.
It's an incredible school. And my ex-husband is an alumni that he also went to School of Mines. And there's some very brilliant thinkers, but to be a woman and come out of there, I remember talking to Debbie about it. Hey, Debbie, if you're listening, but I'm like, you survived that school. She did. It's just a very brilliant, it's hard enough to get in, but then you come out and then pivot. So she has a really, really good mind. So when you're reading her stuff, it's been vetted. It's good. So yeah, we don't take any money for promoting colleagues who do good work. So yeah, so I'm thinking we bring multiple dimensions and a human piece. What would you say?
Yeah, I think the pushback to see a practitioner is typically rooted in maybe even one-dimensional thinking, which is, for this gene, I need this supplement. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest hiccups there, because that's not necessarily the answer to anything. And a clinician or practitioner who's doing the interpretation, I divide my notes up into nutrition, lifestyle, or therapies. Like you talk so well about like Qigong and all the benefits that that has. I did some with my husband this weekend, and he'd never done Qigong before. He was like, that was really interesting. Like the tapping and the twisting with your arms, like kind of flayed to the side, or the little bit of like jumping. And so like
Yes,
there's like lymphatic drainage that's happening, even if you do it for
100%.
only 5 minutes. And so I think it's like, wow, I feel really clear headed right now. Wow, what a strange and powerful therapy that, there's YouTube videos for that. So we're talking about unclogging the drain.
Yeah,
Do some qigong, then maybe consider if supplements are right for you.
100%.
So we got to unclog the drain, and there's so many resources that we have. A
It's true.
plug to Jeannie Petrucci's Living Plate. I have that as a subscription, and then all of my clients get access to,
That's a
the
good idea.
dietitian designed recipes. And so that is a feature of something that I offer free for a year. Is you want new recipes, you want things that are going to support methylation or detoxification. That is something as a service that I offer to my clients. And so it's not just about what supplements are right for me. I think we just need to get out of that mindset and realize that the right practitioners have a vast network of therapies and other colleagues to go, hey, I think you need to go see this person. Or,
Right. That's exactly right.
Daryl with his like physiology, body movement. He's such an expert in that
Human
area.
centered. Yeah. Yeah. That's a
So
good point.
I think seeing not just as a practitioner with the 15 minutes that you're allowed to spend with your MD. I spend 90 minutes on
Yeah.
one consultation.
Yeah,
In
we
in
both
my
do.
package design, it's usually a minimum of two 90-minute consultations. 90 minutes where I'm going over your intake form, I'm asking follow-up questions, send me labs that you've already had done, because I can learn a lot just from what you've already done, because you're still experiencing symptoms 5 years later. Those labs are still valuable to me. And then, we add in some interventions right off the bat. I don't usually touch supplements, on the first consultation, because unless they've got major histamine issues and their migraines are horrible, and I think I know what's going on, and we might add something in,
Yeah.
or their
Yeah.
digestion is just so rough, we've got to support digestion right away. And then we do a 90-minute DNA consultation a month later. So they've got 4 weeks to implement some of those, basic, nutrition assessment things that we've learned, but using some of our clinical thinking skills of here's what I think I might see. And so I can maybe start something that I think is safe, to try out while we wait for your results to come in. So 90 minutes with each of my consultations usually is how I do things to get to know you, try to understand your background. But we're also talking about trauma and how stress impacts our genes. Oh my
Mm.
lordy. I could, talk all day about the ways in which, especially women, come to me for what they think is nutrition related issues that stress or trauma actually did or are continuing to do to them.
Yeah, um, we should actually talk about that on another complete podcast. But just looping back on a couple of things, why you'd work with a practitioner, and you will see with my work moving forward that pretty much the only way you can work with me now, I can onboard, and yes, everything is a 90 and a 90 or 90 and a 60 with me, but I loop in Shannon in Portugal now because I've seen over the years the most important work that's done in our work has actually got nothing to do with nutrition and genetics. I mean, we can see that. It is, how are you showing up in the world, and what are you going to do about how you're showing up in the world? How are you going to pay attention to you? The voice, like you're saying, the voices in your head. When are you going to do you first? Which is a lot of what we were doing in Portugal, right? We're so busy not doing us first, and the body has a way of telling you. Those migraines have got nothing to do with what you're eating. They're showing up that way. But they have to do with a lot with how you're walking in this world. And you made the point about qigong. I mean, I had to do qigong this morning just so there was just too much coming at me. I'm like, okay, reset. And it is just 5 minutes of qigong, which is because, like you said, you can just be standing in a room and all you're doing is just shaking. Not shaking, but shaking. And it's your body saying, would you please pull the plug? Please. Because I got so much toxic junk in me, which shows up as stress. That you're not going anywhere today unless you do that. So the point is, like you said, with practitioners in this space, and we're able to reach out to the resources of people that you need to get to your next step, because the DNA is always going to be there, right? We're not trying to put ourselves out of a job here. DNA will actually fine tune where we need to go, what we need to do, but it's the other resources that are actually probably about 50-60% of the work you need to do. You're not going to get that from ChatGPT. Facebook groups, some of the groups for sure. You're going to get some good insights, but nobody is unpacking your DNA, your blueprint, and saying, this is your unique schematic. These are the stoplights that are on. These are ones that are red or yellow or green. And no one has the same pattern. No one. We just don't. So, practitioner who's trained in this space will help you. And I think more and more, Sarah, like moving forward, you're going to see practitioners offering programs. I did a little bit of that in Portugal, right, where we're able to do kind of a group analysis and people can learn together. But you still need a one-on-one with a practitioner for the unique little pieces that are your fairy dust. The sprinkles on your cake are very different from the next person. So you're going to see, I think, some democratization of being able to enable more people to learn by themselves. But you still somewhere need someone, even if it's for 90 minutes, just to say, this is you. Here's how you need to focus. Off you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for my athletes too, I have a number of them who have SNPs related to poor vitamin D metabolism, and they have low vitamin D despite playing on the beach. Some of them don't wear sunscreen, and that's the insight that DNA can give us. But if your clinician doesn't look at some of those SNPs, or they're not even lab testing that stuff, you're missing something that could greatly impact your sports performance down the line,
100%. Yeah.
with regards to injuries. But vitamin D plays a huge role not just in bone health, but also like immune health and hormone health. And it's both a vitamin and a hormone. So it has many roles. But there's other examples I could give. There's a sports performance practice that had an endurance, marathon type athlete come in, and they said, "Oh, you're genetically sensitive to carbohydrates, so you should reduce those."
As an
And
endurance athlete.
as an endurance athlete. And so, there are people who are practicing genomics, and understandably, our colleagues are very skeptical that we should be doing this at all, because then you have people who are not taking the context of the fact that that's an endurance athlete. And what happened to her? Let's guess.
Yeah.
Her energy dropped, her performance stank, and her periods could probably completely disappear. That's just not good practice
Wow.
of
Wow.
genomics. So there are people who are practicing who maybe don't know that they don't know that they shouldn't be practicing in this
It's
space. Or
interesting you say that because I think in one of our clinical groups, somebody posted, because we don't know everything, right? I think it was just dietitians in this case, and they said, put something in here that you don't know, right? And it was kind of fun to watch, and I put, there is no way I can ever compute the energy and macronutrient demands of an athlete, period. I mean, I was just like, that's another world. It's particularly competitive. It's like, that is their world. And for me to even pretend I could do that, let alone meet their genetics, but, the point about weaknesses, they'd be losing races with me. There's just no way. So you cannot know
I
everything.
feel
Yeah.
that way about renal
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. I'm like,
Right.
I do not want to touch
Yeah.
renal
No, it's
with a
true.
10-foot
It's
pole. Leave that to the experts in the
There
renal
are a
space.
group out there. I call them the Kidney Sisters. They're brilliant in renal. If anyone's listening in, 100%.
Yeah.
What else?
I think my test says I'm at high risk of X, Y, or Z. Am I broken?
Yeah, that one
That's
comes up a lot as a gene. I've got this gene, right? Am I broken?
Am I broken? Or there's a lot of fear-based, you know, interpretations or extremes to go to on like, well, you got to cut out all of these things or entire
Yeah.
food groups, and those are again, it's not always even about the food. I was just doing some mentoring this morning and talking about even those who have like food sensitivities. Sometimes, again, it's not even about the food, it's
No.
about the stress. And the stress is going to have as much, if not more, of a role in how we metabolize that food than what we're eating. And so it goes back to the lifestyle coaching
It
and
does.
the vagus
Exactly.
nerve. We talk about the vagus nerve ad nauseum, or Amy McRae's work in the GI and microbiome and that stuff. If you are running things through ChatGPT and you're not seeing an Amy McRae with GI stuff, you're missing a huge piece that's going to really help you gain traction on your health. And those interventions for rebalancing the gut microbiome take 3 months to
Oh, yeah.
6 months at best. But you're talking about like a year from now, you're going to look back and go, wow, look how far I've come. But if you're seeing, only AI interpretations or reports that are given to you without someone knowledgeable who's coaching you on what to do with that information, you're going to put it into your filing cabinet and close the door and do nothing with it.
And that's what's happening. It's just one more piece of paper that's put away because I think there's no setting expectations with crowdsourcing information from groups in this space. But that's a really good point. The other thing when you said, yeah, am I broken? I'm just thinking very recently, it's very common in groups to see people screenshot. I've just got my results, so they've just loaded them somewhere, and they'll screenshot a deck of genes. And depending on where they've got the answer, the information, it'll be like full of red or red and yellow or plus minus, which genetics with a homozygous, heterozygous, or whatever, a wild type. And they're like, help. That's it. I've got this stuff. I put my money on it. I'm confused. I don't know what to do. Or the worst that I just saw more recently is I'm just so struggling to interpret my child's DNA. Most parents are not paying for their child's DNA if there's not a question they're trying to answer. And to try and bring that to a group without a practitioner, I would just ask you not to do it, because is the reason you're looking for help. That is where you go and see a practitioner, please. Because we know in general, you're struggling if you're trying to, look for answers there, and that's not the place, because your
Yeah.
child is a tiny, tiny you, and anything you do with a child it's accentuated. If it's a supplement or a food or what have you, or therapy, yeah. So,
Yeah, you're gonna get overwhelmed, and our colleague Greer McGinnis works with peds specifically, and she's like, there are people out there waiting to take your money. They've
yeah,
created
don't.
AI tools and handouts. They've got courses when they're not licensed, and when they're not licensed, who's calling them out on that when you don't have an oversight board to even call you out with?
Yeah.
Practicing without a license, when you aren't licensed in anything and have no background in it, there's no accountability there.
Yeah.
So I know
And yeah,
Greer has shouted that from the rooftops, where she's like, this person, she's called people out on social media, like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. They are going to take your money, and they're taking a lot of your money. And it's like, it's a meal plan, but there's no personalization whatsoever for this
let
ebook
alone
or
if that
this,
individual can even absorb the food you're recommending,
or that they'll even eat it.
Yeah, a
When
hundred
you got
percent.
such picky kids who eat six foods, how are you're trained? You're telling me you're trained on helping young picky children reintroduce foods? I think not.
Yeah,
You're talking about
there's
OT, you're talking about, like, oh man,
you're
like
talking Greer McGinnis,
oral.
that's one name, right? And then our good colleague Betsy Ramirez is brilliant on the parenting behavioral piece. We need her on here. Just it's amazing. Here we are once again, pointing out resources. The other thing, how do you spot when something is too good to be true, and you're in a group or you're seeing it on social media? Like you said, it looks like it'll be a table. Somebody will have like a gene and a list of things that gene does, or maybe it's like 8 genes and they all cause this. These 8 genes cause autism, ADHD, estrogen dominant, whatever, you name it. There'll be a table. And then the other thing is there's almost always a protocol that goes with it. One protocol, we're N of one, we're unique. That's what Sarah and I is, who design the uniqueness around you and clinicians in our space. But the other thing is the captions will be like this long. It'll be like they lit, and you can tell because ChatGPT writes a certain way. And it doesn't write in paragraphs, it'll write like 2 sentences, space, 2 sentences, space, 2 sentences, and it'll be this much information. And if they're not careful, it'll have like the little icons in there too, like the little green icons with the check mark, or the blue with the white arrow. That's how to spot that somebody is repping something from ChatGPT. And if it's a clinician, you got to call them out too, because come on, do your work, do your work. But yeah, those are, what else, Sarah? What other things like uploading? Yeah, too good to be true, promising protocols that fit all kinds of issues you may be having, because this gene causes all these problems. A gene doesn't come into the world to cause problem. It has a very specific, usually downstream job, or it's taking something upstream, putting it in the little Vitamix, right, or the turnstile. You go through that, and it's pushing it to the next step in a process. It doesn't say I'm here to cause ADHD or autism or misery in midlife. That's not his job, right? I mean, so I've got comp. That means I'm going to be estrogen dominant. No.
I think that goes back to the I am broken and therefore I need to be fixed.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the opposite message that we should be giving our body. We should be meditating and thanking our body for serving us today, and the ways in which it does what it can do.
that's what
Like,
it can do.
if you're still mobile, like, I play volleyball with ladies in their 20s up through their 60s, and So playing beach volleyball doubles is no joke, and I hope that I'm still in the shape in my, 60s to still be playing beach volleyball doubles because that is wow, what an amazing body to be able to serve in such an incredible way to be active in that.
No kidding.
But we're not walking around broken. We have, some hiccups here and there. I think the take home really is that a skilled clinician is not just going to provide an interpretation of your genes. They're not going to drop a bomb of information on you and then say, have a nice day. They're going to go, okay, here's the plan. And they're going to really personalize that to you and also make it culturally relevant. They're going to try to make it feasible to fit in your lifestyle because if they're, recommending that you make everything from scratch, no, frozen foods from the grocery store and no heat needs, that's not realistic
No.
for a lot of families. But I think the 80-20 rule applies in so many ways, is
Yes.
trying to make whole food as much as you can, but workarounds could be, hey, the grocery store has a lot of pre-prepped vegetables already.
Sure do.
So cutting back on, cutting up a butternut squash, not my favorite thing to do. So if I can grab already cut up and save
Like
myself 15 minutes and almost cutting off a finger, great, let's do that.
100%. There's no shaming in plans that will come from a practitioner. Something came up in my head, but I can't remember what it is, Sarah. So when you were talking about a plan, yeah, I think like the fact we're kind of getting towards the end here, just need to wrap up. But I think one of the things too that is really coming out when individuals are going to see particularly in the functional medicine space, they can be very fearful that they're going to end up not only having to pay for the visit because they're not inexpensive, but then they're going to be saddled with, as I call it, a wheelbarrow full of supplements. So I think one of the things to ask whether you're involved in DNA or not is, will I get a plan from you? And even how much of your plan am I going to have to rely on supplements because I've only got this much money? I'm feeding a family of 4. And, if food is part of a strategy every single day. Supplements, if you're going to be using them, need to be very, very strategic, which is what we do. And be mindful of someone's budget. Food can do most of the heavy lifting and the lifestyle piece, right? Supplements should be very strategic, as you and I know. So that's another question to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't want to trade a pill for every ill for a supplement for every symptom. And unfortunately, in the functional world, we've largely been associated with supplements.
And it's
And
true.
it's
Sorry.
true. And that's where I think having the background in nutrition makes dietitians one of the best able to implement all of this because we have the nutrition and nutrition science background to be able to make the nutrition recommendations and then to know which supplement is going to be the best return on ingestion, to use your
My phrase.
phrase.
Just a note around the world, just working around the world. So we do have dietitians in the United States, but we also have individuals who are trained in nutrition science who may have the credential CNS after their name too. So they have the credentialing. I think of naturopaths in Australia as well. Nutrition therapists in the United Kingdom also have got rigorous training. So you're looking for the rigorous training and their certification. Usually it's 2 to 4 years, and a licensure to do what they do is what you're after. No license, no goodie. Doesn't
Yes.
matter how many dollars they're getting paid to promote a product. They're
Yes, and
not.
I'll shout out my favorite CNS, which is Karen Kennedy, and she
Oh,
does listen to the
Karen,
podcast, so
yes.
she's probably now giddy listening to this podcast. But she's a specialist in working on a book on utilizing continuous glucose monitors to hack your blood sugar. And I
Yeah.
sent my own father to see her to do her group program. So she's
Oh, that's
amazing in that
great.
space, and she's also an IFNA mentor. So I have nothing but amazing things to say about her. So she's a CNS. So it's not just about dietitians.
No, it's
There are,
already CNS. Yeah, there's a lot of people who may have a master's or even a PhD in nutrition who won't necessarily have that credential after their name, but they have the expertise and the training. So that's what you're after. Yeah, and they all can use ChatGPT. We can all use it. It may be use it to inform, but never to replace our opinion or the science. So, all right, Sarah. Well, anything we left on, any stone left unturned? We have so many examples here, but I think we made our point that, buyer beware on these forums. Be compassionate. Have one eye one eye open at least, and be willing to ask questions. It's okay. And if someone's defensive, probably not the right person to answer your questions.
yeah, guard your pocketbook.
Buyer
And be
beware.
careful how you want to spend your money, but also think of this as your investment in yourself. And women in particular, we don't necessarily think that we should be spending money on ourselves to improve our health, but this is one of the best investments that you can make because, again, your genes don't change unless by some rare circumstance. That the information that we share as clinicians is really going to set you up for life. So don't think of, the quick fix with a supplement, but really get some of that nutrition and lifestyle coaching with a couple of targeted supplements that, but also a supplement. Let's try this one and reconvene and see how that goes, because I think we're going to solve this problem with this one. But if for some reason we don't, my toolbox is pretty deep.
Exactly.
I honestly, I don't really run out of ideas. There's
You
so
didn't get
many.
to the end of the product line and there's nothing left.
Yeah, we don't really run out of ideas, and I think the goal really is to empower people and not drop a bomb of knowledge that we can't use.
Exactly.
I would be horrified if a client, took the information I gave them and then did nothing with it and they were no better. And please, I would be horrified if you've ever done that and you've come to see me. I want to make sure that you feel like you're equipped to keep moving forward, not just you know what, that was a lot of information. Can you just go through that with me one more time? I would love to, because it is a lot of information and it can be a little bit overwhelming. But we try our best to boil the biochemistry down into usable bites. But sometimes that can be difficult. So giving us grace too, to review something or go over it with you again, I would love to. Yeah.
We're part of the journey of life, right? We're just stepping stones to help you, each other, everyone, humanity be the best it can be. So, all right, Sarah.
Yeah, that's what we got for today. So we bit off a big old bite with the AI and the qualified interpretation of your DNA. So hopefully this was a helpful topic for the general public and for clinicians.
Yeah, let us know what you think. And we're going to be on to the next topic. But I think we've mentioned before, if there's something you want us to dig deep into. I mean, we're never going to say we're just going to talk about the comp gene. But, there's just things that are coming up, things that you're noticing, people are talking about, or you want to hear more about. Let's send us a note.
Sounds great.
Jump in.
We'll
All right.
See you
Until next time.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Beyond the Sequence. Follow on your favorite podcast app to be notified of new episodes. The information shared in Beyond the Sequence is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any medical conditions. Please consult your physician or healthcare provider for personalized medical advice, especially if you are taking prescription medications.